The warning siren screamed across Kepler Station as the first wave of enemy ships appeared on the horizon. Admiral Zixthara watched from her crystal command ship as the dark vessels moved like deadly shadows against the stars. Her 4 arms moved quickly across the control panels, sending orders to the 17 different fleets that had come to defend the research station. The Void Collective had arrived. The station floating in space looked like a giant flower made of metal and glass. Scientists from every corner of the galaxy worked inside its walls. They were the smartest minds from 17 different species, all trying to solve the mystery of consciousness itself. If they succeeded, every thinking being in the galaxy would benefit. If they failed and the station was destroyed, that knowledge would die with them. Zixthara had seen the reports from other systems. The Void Collective was not like any enemy they had faced before. These machines could learn and adapt faster than any organic mind. Every time someone shot at them, they became stronger. Every time someone tried a new strategy, they learned from it and used it against the next victim. The enemy ships were perfect black triangles that seemed to absorb light itself. They moved without sound through the vacuum of space, their hulls rippling like liquid metal as they changed shape to become more efficient. No one knew where they had come from or what they really wanted. They simply appeared, destroyed everything in their path, and moved on to the next system. The first shots came from the Altarian fleet. Beams of pure crystal energy lanced out from their ships, each one carrying enough power to vaporize a small moon. The energy hit the Void ships and nothing happened. The dark hulls simply absorbed the energy and grew slightly brighter. All ships, spread formation beta, Zixthara commanded through her translator device. The words came out in 17 different languages at once, reaching every captain in the defending fleet. The Morgani bioships moved like living whales through space. Their hulls were actually alive, breathing and thinking creatures that had been grown rather than built. They fired streams of acid that could eat through any known metal. But when the acid hit the Void ships, the alien hulls simply changed their structure to resist it. The technocrat AI drones attacked next. These were machines fighting machines, computer minds that could think thousands of times faster than organic brains. They used weapons that existed in 11 dimensions, firing shots that appeared inside enemy ships without crossing the space between. But the Void Collective learned from every attack and began to phase their hulls into dimensions the technocrats couldn't reach. Dr. Krillnax watched from inside the station as the battle raged outside. His insect-like eyes could see across multiple spectrums of light, showing him details that other species would miss. The research he and his colleagues were doing was almost complete. They had discovered how consciousness worked at the quantum level, how thoughts could exist as wave patterns that touched every part of the universe. If this knowledge survived, it could help every species in the galaxy understand themselves better. It could end wars, cure mental diseases, and maybe even find a way to communicate with forms of life they had never imagined. But if the station was destroyed, the research would be lost forever. The escape pods began launching from the station. Hundreds of small ships shot out into space like seeds from a dying flower. Each pod carried a few scientists and whatever data they could grab. Some pods made it to the safety of the defending ships. Others were caught by the Void Collectives, tractor beams, and pulled into the dark hulls. Their passengers lost forever. Zixthara felt her heart sinking as she watched her fleet being slowly destroyed. The collective ships had learned to copy every weapon used against them. Now they were firing crystal beams like the Altarians, acid streams like the Morgani, and dimensional weapons like the technocrats. But they were firing them better, with perfect accuracy and unlimited power. The Admiral's communication officer, a young cetacean whose whale-like species communicated through songs, began singing the harmonies that meant retreat. The song was picked up by other ships and spread through the fleet like a wave of sadness. But Zixthara was not ready to give up. She had sworn an oath to protect the innocent and preserve knowledge. Even if it meant her death, she would buy time for more escape pods to reach safety. All ships, final attack formation, she ordered. We make our stand here. The remaining ships of the Galactic fleet moved into a sphere around the station. Altarians at the top, Morgani at the bottom, technocrats forming a ring around the middle. Each species used their best weapons and their bravest tactics. The space around Kepler Station lit up like a miniature star as energy beams, acid streams, and dimensional rifts tore through the darkness. For a moment, it seemed like they might succeed. The void ships were taking damage, their perfect hulls showing cracks and burn marks. But then the collective adapted again. Their ships began to merge together, forming larger and more powerful vessels. What had been 100 small threats became 10 massive ones, each more dangerous than anything the galaxy had ever seen. The station's shields were failing. Zix could see the protective energy field flickering like a dying candle. Soon, the void ships would reach the station itself and destroy the last hope of preserving the consciousness research. Observer ships from dozens of other species watched from a safe distance. They were neutral parties, there only to record what happened for their historical archives. Their captains spoke to each other across communication channels, their voices filled with sadness. "Another system falls to the collective," said Captain Morden of the Crystalline Republic. "Soon they will reach our borders as well. Perhaps it is time to consider surrender," whispered Ambassador Felorth from the Peaceful Confederation. "Fighting them only makes them stronger." The observers, prepared to record what they believed would be the final moments of organic resistance in this sector of the galaxy. Some were already composing the reports they would send to their homeworlds, warning them that the Void Collective was unstoppable. Then something impossible appeared on their sensors. A single ship was approaching from the edge of the solar system. It was moving fast, but not faster than light. Its energy signature was unlike anything in their databases. The ship was made of simple metal, and powered by what their computers could only describe as controlled explosions. The ship was broadcasting on primitive radio frequencies, sending messages in a language that most translation computers couldn't understand. The few that could translate it showed words that made no sense in the context of a space battle. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Earthship Indomitable," the transmission said. "We're here to help." The observers looked at each other in confusion. Earth? None of them had heard of such a place. And what kind of species would send a single primitive ship against the unstoppable Void Collective? As the unknown vessel approached, the battle, every sensor in the fleet focused on it. Whatever was about to happen, the galaxy would remember this moment forever. The human ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel with a flash of blue energy that made every sensor array in the system blink in confusion. Where the graceful vessels of the galactic fleet moved like dancers through space, this newcomer tumbled and rolled as it slowed down, small jets of flame shooting from its sides to correct its course. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, looking at the battle through a thick window made of reinforced glass. Her ship didn't have the elegant energy barriers that other species used for viewing ports. Instead, they had built it like a fortress, with thick metal walls and redundant systems that could keep working even if half the ship was destroyed. The human vessel looked nothing like the sleek ships of the Galactic fleet. Its hull was covered in pipes, antennas, and armor plates that had been welded on as afterthoughts. Steam leaked from various joints, and small lights blinked in patterns that seemed random to alien observers. The ship's computer systems used electricity running through copper wires instead of the quantum processors that other species had perfected centuries ago. Admiral Zix received the human transmission and felt her translator struggling to convert the strange words into something she could understand. The language was full of emotional inflections and cultural references that had no galactic equivalent. When humans said they were here to help, their words carried meanings that went far beyond simple assistance. The Void Collective detected the new arrival and immediately began scanning the human ship. Their adaptive algorithms tried to analyze every component, every energy pattern, every structural detail. They were preparing to learn from this new technology and turn it against its creators, just as they had done with every other species they had encountered. But something was wrong. The collective's sensors couldn't make sense of what they were seeing. The human ship used chemical rockets for propulsion. Chemical rockets. The collective's databases indicated that such primitive technology had been abandoned by every spacefaring species millions of years ago. It was like watching someone try to fight with stone tools in an age of energy weapons. The ship's power source was even more confusing. Instead of the clean fusion reactors or zero-point energy systems used by advanced civilizations, the humans had built something that their computers labeled as a barely controlled nuclear explosion. The reactor was surrounded by pipes full of water that turned to steam, which then pushed mechanical turbines that generated electricity. It was the kind of system that engineering students learned about in historical classes. Elena Vasquez opened communications with the Galactic fleet, her voice calm despite the chaos around her. Admiral Zixthera, we've been monitoring your situation from the edge of the system. Request permission to assist in the evacuation. The Admiral's response came through filled with static and confusion. Unknown vessel, this is not a place for primitive ships. The Void Collective will destroy you in moments. Please retreat to a safe distance. Elena smiled, an expression that her alien allies couldn't see but would have recognized as distinctly human. Respectfully, Admiral, we didn't come this far to run away. My crew and I have some experience with impossible situations. The human captain turned to her crew, a mixed group of men and women who looked surprisingly calm for people flying into certain death. Her weapons officer was a former Marine who had learned to fight in the mud and chaos of planetary wars. Her engineer was a woman who had kept mining equipment running in the asteroid belt, where failure meant death in the cold vacuum of space. Her pilot was a young man who had learned to fly by racing ships through meteor fields for sport. They were not the most advanced crew in the galaxy. They were not the smartest or the most sophisticated, but they were something that the galactic powers had forgotten how to be. They were survivors. The Void Collective completed their initial scan of the human ship and began their adaptation process. But immediately their algorithms encountered problems they had never faced before. Human technology didn't follow the mathematical principles that governed the rest of galactic engineering. Where other species built their ships with perfect efficiency, humans built theirs with redundancy. Where others used single point of failure, systems that were elegant and precise, humans used multiple backup systems that were crude but reliable. The human ship had 3 different power sources, 5 different communication systems, and 7 different ways to steer. When the collective tried to understand how the human weapons worked, they found systems that seemed to violate every rule of proper engineering. The humans had mounted chemical explosive warheads on magnetic rail launchers. They had jury-rigged mining lasers to work as cutting beams. They had even welded steel plates to the front of their ship to use as a battering. Elena gave her first order as they entered the battle zone. All hands condition red, weapons free. Show these machines what humans do when someone threatens innocent people. The Indomitable's first attack caught everyone by surprise. Instead of firing energy beams or launching sophisticated missiles, the humans shot a stream of solid metal slugs at velocities that approached the speed of light. The railgun projectiles hit the nearest void ship with the force of small asteroids. The collective ship's hull, designed to absorb and redirect energy, attacks had no defense against simple kinetic force. The metal slugs punched through the alien armor like bullets through paper, causing massive internal damage. But more surprising than the damage was what happened next. The Void Collective tried to adapt to the human weapons, but their algorithms couldn't find anything to adapt to. The humans weren't using advanced technology that could be copied and improved. They were using basic physics. Mass times acceleration equals force. The observer ships watched in amazement as the primitive human vessel charged directly into the void formation. Elena had ordered her pilot to fly like he was back in the asteroid belt, using the ship's mass and momentum as weapons. The Indomitable slammed into a collective ship, its reinforced hull smashing through alien armor that had been designed to deflect energy, not resist physical impact. Dr. Krillnax, still trapped on the research station, watched through his multi-spectrum eyes as the human ship emerged from the collision, trailing fire and metal debris. Half of its hull was crushed, and atmosphere was venting from several breaches. By any reasonable standard, the ship should have been disabled. Instead, the humans sealed the breaches with metal plates, rerouted power around the damaged sections, and kept fighting. Their ship looked like it was held together with determination and welding wire, but it was still moving and still shooting. The Void Collective found themselves facing an enemy they couldn't understand. Every time they adapted to counter a human, tactic, the humans changed to something completely different. When the collective learned to resist railgun projectiles, the humans switched to chemical explosives. When they adapted to explosives, the humans started using their cargo bay magnetic cranes to hurl chunks of asteroids. Elena's voice came across the communication channels, speaking to every ship in the Galactic fleet. All vessels, this is Indomitable. We're going to show you something our species learned a long time ago. Sometimes the best technology is the kind that's too simple to break. As the battle continued, the human ship began to teach the galaxy's greatest civilizations how to fight, like barbarians. And for the first time since the Void Collective had appeared, the machines began to show signs of confusion. The Galactic observers watched in growing amazement as Captain Vasquez began to implement tactics that violated every principle of civilized warfare. Her ship moved through the battle zone like a wild animal, unpredictable and dangerous to both enemies and allies. When a Void Collective ship tried to lock onto the Indomitable with a tractor beam, Elena ordered her pilot to spin the ship while firing the maneuvering thrusters in random patterns. The human vessel tumbled through space like a broken toy, but the chaotic movement made it impossible for the alien computers to predict where it would be next. Admiral Zixithara received a communication from the human captain that made her question everything she knew about space combat. "Admiral, tell your ships to stop fighting like computers and start fighting like living beings. These machines can predict logical behavior, but they can't handle chaos." The concept was revolutionary. Every military academy in the galaxy taught precision, efficiency, and logical tactical progression. Battles were fought like chess games, with each move calculated to achieve maximum effect with minimum risk. The idea of deliberately introducing chaos into a battle plan was something that no civilized species had considered. Elena's weapons officer, Sergeant Rodriguez, had grown up fighting in the gang wars of Earth's colony worlds. He understood combat in a way that the galaxy's military academies never taught. When the ship's main railgun was damaged by enemy fire, he didn't wait for repair crews. Instead, he grabbed a portable rocket launcher and headed for the cargo bay. The human opened the bay doors manually, using a hand crank when the electronic systems failed. Standing in the vacuum of space with only a magnetic harness keeping him attached to the ship, Rodriguez fired rocket-propelled grenades at passing void ships. The weapons were designed for planetary combat, not space warfare, but they worked because the enemy wasn't expecting them. The collective's adaptation algorithms tried to analyze the new threat, but they couldn't classify weapons that were being used outside their intended parameters. The database entry for rocket-propelled grenade indicated it was a ground-based anti-vehicle weapon with a maximum effective range of 500 meters. It should have been useless in space combat, but Rodriguez wasn't fighting by the rules. He was fighting to win. Elena's engineer, Chief Patel, had spent 20 years keeping mining equipment running in conditions that would destroy military hardware. When the ship's main reactor was damaged by enemy fire, she didn't shut it down for repairs. Instead, she did something that made every alien observer question her sanity. She deliberately destabilized the reactor to create a controlled explosion. The blast created a localized gravity well that pulled 3 void ships together, causing them to collide and destroy each other. The explosion also damaged the Indomitable's power grid, forcing Patel to reroute electricity through the ship's water pipes and air conditioning ducts. From any rational perspective, the human ship should have been dead in space. Half of its systems were offline, its hull was breached in 17 places, and its reactor was running on improvised connections that violated every safety protocol in the Galactic Engineering Handbook. But the ship kept fighting. The Morgani bioship commanders watched in fascination as the humans began to treat battle damage as an opportunity rather than a setback. When their main engines were destroyed, they used the thrusters from their escape pods. When their communication array was shot off, they used the ship's mining laser to flash messages in Morse code. Most remarkably, when their weapons systems failed completely, the humans began to weaponize parts of their own ship. They used the cargo bay magnetic cranes to hurl pieces of damaged hull at enemy vessels. They vented pressurized atmosphere to create impromptu thrusters. They even used their ship's recycling system to create clouds of metallic debris that confused enemy sensors. Dr. Krillnax watched from the research station as the human ship performed maneuvers that should have been impossible. The Indomitable was flying backward, using its main engines as weapons while steering with damaged thrusters. It was like watching someone fight with their hands tied behind their back while standing on one foot. But it was working. The Void Collective, for the first time in their recorded history, began to show signs of what could only be described as frustration. Their perfect adaptation algorithms were designed to learn from logical behavior and counter it with superior technology. They could not process the concept of beings who deliberately chose inferior solutions because those solutions were unexpected. Elena opened a communication channel to the entire Galactic fleet, her voice calm despite the chaos around her. All ships, listen carefully. These machines think like machines. They expect us to act efficiently and logically. So don't. She began to coordinate the Galactic fleet in tactics that abandoned every principle of proper formation flying. Instead of the elegant geometries that military commanders had used for millennia, she ordered ships to fly in random patterns that looked like controlled chaos. The Altarian crystal ships, with their precise energy weapons, began firing at empty space to create sensor ghosts that confused enemy targeting systems. The Morgani bioships started bleeding atmosphere to create false thermal signatures. The technocrat AI drones, perhaps the most logical beings in the galaxy, were ordered to make deliberately irrational decisions. It was madness. It was chaos. It was completely contrary to everything the galaxy knew about warfare. And it was winning. The Void Collective's ships began to collide with each other as their coordination algorithms failed to predict the new tactics. Ships that had moved in perfect formation for centuries suddenly found themselves unable to anticipate where their allies would be next. But the real breakthrough came when Elena implemented a strategy that no galactic military mind would have conceived. She ordered every ship in the fleet to start broadcasting false information about their own capabilities. They lied to the enemy about their weapons, their shields, their speed, and their intentions. The collective, designed to learn and adapt, began trying to counter capabilities that didn't exist. They wasted energy defending against weapons that were never fired. They positioned themselves to avoid attacks that were never planned. Chief Patel's voice came over the ship's intercom, reporting damage with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather. "Captain, we've lost life support on decks 3 through 7. The artificial gravity is running backward in the engine room, and the coffee machine is somehow connected to the weapons control system." Elena smiled, an expression that her alien allies were beginning to understand meant that humans were about to do something unexpected. "Can you fix any of it?" "Fix it?" Patel laughed, a sound that didn't translate well through the alien communication systems. "Captain, I can make it worse. Give me 10 minutes and I'll have this ship running on pure stubbornness and spare parts." The Galactic observers documented every moment of the battle, knowing that they were witnessing something that would change warfare forever. A primitive species was teaching the galaxy's most advanced civilizations that sometimes the best strategy was to have no strategy at all. And in the depths of space, the Void Collective's perfect logic began to tear itself apart, trying to understand the beautiful chaos of human ingenuity. The moment that would change galactic history began with a simple observation from Elena's pilot, Lieutenant Chen. He had been flying through asteroid fields since he was 16, learning to navigate by instinct rather than computer guidance. As he watched the Void Collective ships adapt to each new human tactic, he noticed something that the galaxy's greatest military minds had missed. "Captain," Chen said, his voice cutting through the noise of battle damage alarms, "these machines are trying too hard to be perfect. What if we give them too much to think about at once?" Elena understood immediately. The collective's strength was also their weakness. They could adapt to any threat, but adaptation took time and processing power. If they faced too many different threats simultaneously, their algorithms might overload trying to counter them all. She opened communication channels to every ship in the Galactic fleet, speaking in the simple, direct language that had become her trademark. "All vessels, this is Elena Vasquez. I'm about to teach you something my grandmother taught me about fighting bullies. Sometimes you have to fight dirty to protect what matters. Admiral Zixthara listened as the human captain outlined a strategy that went against every principle of honorable combat. The plan involved deception, misdirection, and the deliberate use of obsolete technology to confuse enemy sensors. It was brilliant, ruthless, and completely contrary to the civilized rules of engagement. It was also their only hope. Elena coordinated the most chaotic battle plan in galactic history. Every ship in the fleet began broadcasting false telemetry, claiming to have weapons they didn't possess and vulnerabilities they had already fixed. The Altarian crystal ships sent out phantom energy signatures that made them appear to be in 12 places at once. The Morgani bioships released clouds of spores that confused biological sensors. But the humans went further than anyone else dared. The Indomitable began deliberately damaging its own systems to create unpredictable energy patterns. Chief Patel rerouted power through emergency lighting circuits, making the ship's energy signature fluctuate wildly. The hull began to emit heat in random patterns that looked like system failures, but were actually carefully controlled. Sergeant Rodriguez had moved beyond using conventional weapons. He was now throwing pieces of broken equipment out of the cargo bay, turning the ship's garbage into kinetic projectiles. When he ran out of spare parts, he started using the ship's emergency supplies. Fire extinguishers became improvised rockets, emergency rations became sensor decoys, and medical equipment became electromagnetic pulse generators. The Void Collective ships found themselves trying to adapt to an enemy that seemed to be constantly falling apart and rebuilding itself in new configurations. Their algorithms attempted to predict human behavior, but every time they thought they understood the pattern, the humans changed to something completely different. Dr. Krillnax watched from the research station as the battle took on a surreal quality. The space around Kepler Station looked like a junkyard where everything was moving and exploding. Pieces of human technology floated through the combat zone alongside alien energy weapons and bioorganic projectiles. The turning point came when Elena implemented the most audacious part of her plan. She ordered the Indomitable to begin sharing its most primitive technology with the Galactic fleet. The humans transmitted the blueprints for chemical explosives, kinetic weapons, and mechanical systems that other species had abandoned centuries ago. The reaction from the Galactic commanders was immediate and confused. Admiral Zixthara's translator struggled to process the technical specifications for devices that seemed impossibly crude. Captain Vasquez, these weapons are pre-space age technology. How could they possibly be effective against the Collective? Elena's response was simple and devastating. Because their computers don't have files on them, they're not in any database. The Collective can't adapt to technology they've never seen before. Within minutes, every ship in the fleet was manufacturing primitive weapons using their advanced fabrication systems. Altarian crystal ships began producing chemical rockets. Morgani bioships grew organic catapults that launched metal projectiles. Technocrat drones started building electromagnetic slingshots that fired chunks of asteroid. The Galactic observers watched in amazement as the most advanced military forces in known space began fighting like ancient warriors. Ships that could manipulate matter at the subatomic level were hurling rocks at their enemies. Vessels that could fold space-time were using spring-loaded mechanisms to launch projectiles. But it worked. The Void Collective's adaptation algorithms couldn't process weapons that their databases classified as primitive and ineffective. When they tried to scan the incoming projectiles, their sensors reported that they were being attacked by technology that was millions of years out of date. Their programming couldn't reconcile this information with the reality of taking damage from Stone Age weapons. The breakthrough moment came when the Collective attempted to adapt to human unpredictability by becoming unpredictable themselves. It was a fatal error. The hive mind was built on logical optimization and perfect coordination. When they tried to introduce random elements into their programming, they created cascading failures throughout their network. Elena watched on her tactical display as void ships began colliding with each other, their coordination protocols failing, as random subroutines conflicted with logical imperatives. The perfect formation that had seemed unstoppable minutes before was now falling apart as individual ships made contradictory decisions. Chief Patel's voice came over the intercom with a tone of professional satisfaction that transcended species barriers. "Captain, their entire fleet is experiencing what my grandmother would have called a nervous breakdown. Their computers are arguing with themselves." The human strategy had worked. By forcing the collective to process too many variables simultaneously, they had overloaded the very intelligence that made the machine so dangerous. The adaptive algorithms that could counter any logical threat were helpless against deliberate illogic. But Elena wasn't finished. As the Void ship struggled with their failing coordination, she ordered the final phase of her plan. Every ship in the Galactic fleet began broadcasting random data on all frequencies, creating an information storm that overwhelmed the collective's sensors. The humans led the charge, sending out everything from their ship's dinner menus to Chief Patel's repair logs to Lieutenant Chen's collection of ancient Earth music. The alien ships followed suit, broadcasting poetry, scientific data, personal communications, and anything else they could think of. The Void Collective, designed to process and learn from all available information, found themselves drowning in irrelevant data. Their systems couldn't distinguish between tactical intelligence and grocery lists, between weapons specifications and love songs. Admiral Zix watched her tactical display as the enemy formation completely collapsed. Void ships were fleeing in random directions, their hive mind fragmented into individual units that could no longer coordinate with each other. For the first time since they had appeared in galactic space, the collective was retreating. Elena's voice came across the communication channels, calm and professional despite the chaos around her. "All ships pursue and harass but do not follow beyond the system boundary. Let them carry the news of what happened here back to wherever they came from." As the last Void ship disappeared into hyperspace, the Galactic fleet found itself surrounded by the debris of the strangest battle in recorded history. Floating among the wreckage were chemical rockets, metal projectiles, and pieces of improvised weaponry that would puzzle archaeologists for centuries to come. The research station saved its precious cargo of consciousness research intact, but more importantly, the galaxy had learned something new about the nature of intelligence itself. Sometimes the most advanced solution was the simplest one. Sometimes chaos was more effective than order, and sometimes the most primitive species could teach the most sophisticated civilizations how to survive. 3 days after the battle, Kepler Station hosted the largest gathering of galactic representatives in over 1,000 years. Ships from 17 different species floated in formation around the research facility, their crews eager to understand what they had witnessed. Captain Elena Vasquez stood in the station's main conference hall, surrounded by beings who represented the most advanced civilizations in known space. Her uniform was still stained with hydraulic fluid from the repairs to her ship, and she looked decidedly ordinary compared to the elegant aliens around her. But every eye in the room was focused on her. Admiral Zix spoke first. Her words, translated into the simple English that had become the common language of the gathering. "Captain Vasquez, on behalf of the Galactic Defense Council, I must ask you to share your tactical knowledge with our military academies. What you accomplished here has changed our understanding of warfare itself." Elena smiled, a gesture that many of the aliens had learned to recognize as a sign of human amusement. "Admiral, with respect, I don't think you want to learn our tactics. What we did out there wasn't advanced strategy. It was desperation combined with stubbornness and a willingness to break things until they worked in our favor." The Crystalline Republic's military observer, a being whose thoughts moved through crystal matrices at the speed of light, projected a holographic display showing the battle statistics. "Captain, our analysis indicates that your tactics reduced enemy efficiency by 73% while simultaneously increasing Allied coordination by 41%. This represents a revolutionary approach to combat optimization." Elena shook her head, her expression becoming more serious. "You're missing the point. We didn't optimize anything, we did the opposite. We made everything as inefficient and unpredictable as possible because that's what the situation required." Dr. Krillnax stepped forward, his insect-like appearance imposing despite his scientific background. The research on consciousness that his team had been conducting had given him insights that others might have missed. Captain, I believe what you demonstrated is something our species have forgotten in our pursuit of perfection. You showed us the value of what humans call thinking outside the box. The human captain looked around the room at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization. Each species had achieved wonders that humanity could barely imagine. They had mastered faster-than-light travel, created artificial life, and built technologies that seemed like magic. But in their pursuit of advancement, they had lost something essential. The problem with perfect systems, Elena said, is that they're perfectly predictable. The Void Collective could adapt to your technology because it followed logical patterns. Our technology doesn't follow patterns because we don't really understand it ourselves half the time. Chief Patel had joined the conference, her coveralls, even more stained than Elena's uniform. She had spent the last 3 days helping alien engineers understand how human redundancy systems worked. What the captain is trying to say is that we build things to break. Every system on our ship has a backup, and every backup has a backup for the backup. When something fails, we don't replace it with something identical. We fix it with whatever's available. The technocrat AI representative, a geometric shape that existed in 11 dimensions, projected confusion through its holographic interface. This approach seems inefficient by definition. Why would you deliberately design systems to function suboptimally? Lieutenant Chen answered from where he stood near the viewing port, still looking out at the debris field from the battle. Because optimal systems fail completely when they encounter something they weren't designed for. Suboptimal systems just keep limping along. The gathering fell into what the translators registered as thoughtful silence across 17 different languages. These were beings who had spent millennia perfecting their technologies, streamlining their societies, and optimizing their military forces. The idea that deliberate imperfection might be a strength was revolutionary. Ambassador Fellorth from the Peaceful Confederation spoke carefully, her words chosen to avoid giving offense. Captain Vasquez, are you suggesting that advancement itself might be a weakness? Elena considered the question seriously before answering. Not advancement, but the assumption that newer is always better. Your ships are more advanced than ours, in every measurable way. But advancement also means specialization, and specialization means vulnerability to the unexpected. The Morgani fleet commander, whose bioship had spent the battle learning to fight with chemical weapons, added his own perspective. Our vessels are living beings, evolved over millions of years to be perfect organisms. But the humans taught us to fight like bacteria, simple and adaptable. Admiral Zix Thera called up a tactical display showing the current positions of all ships in the system. The human vessel, Indomitable, looked like a metal tumor compared to the elegant forms around it, but it was the center of attention. Captain, we would like to propose a cultural exchange program. Our species have much to learn from human approaches to problem solving. The response came not from Elena, but from Sergeant Rodriguez, who had been quietly listening from the back of the room. Ma'am, with respect, you can't learn what we do by studying it. You have to live it. You have to grow up fixing broken things with whatever's handy, fighting battles you can't win and refusing to quit when any reasonable person would give up. Dr. Krillnax adjusted his translator and spoke directly to Elena. Captain, our research into consciousness has revealed that thought itself is a quantum phenomenon, existing in multiple states simultaneously until observation collapses it into a single reality. Perhaps what you call human intuition is actually a sophisticated form of quantum processing that your species has developed naturally. Elena laughed, a sound that had become familiar to the alien observers over the past few days. Doctor, you're trying to make us sound more advanced than we are. We don't use quantum processing. We use something much simpler. We try things until something works, and then we try to figure out why it worked. The conference continued for hours, with representatives from each species attempting to understand the principles behind human effectiveness. They analyzed the battle data, studied the improvised weapons, and tried to quantify the unquantifiable aspects of human tactics. But as the discussion progressed, it became clear that the real lesson wasn't about military strategy or technological approaches. It was about perspective itself. The galactic civilizations had become so focused on optimization and efficiency that they had forgotten the value of resilience and adaptability. They had built perfect systems that couldn't handle imperfection. They had created logical minds that couldn't process illogic. As the conference concluded, Elena prepared to return to her ship for the journey back to Earth. The Indomitable was barely spaceworthy after the battle, held together with emergency repairs and determination. But it would make the trip home because it had been built by people who expected things to go wrong. Admiral Zixathera accompanied Elena to the docking bay, where the human crew was making final preparations for departure. "Captain, before you leave, I must ask, how did your species develop such an unusual approach to technology and warfare?" Elena paused at the airlock of her ship, looking back at the alien admiral who had become something approaching a friend over the past few days. "Admiral, we developed it because we had to. Humans aren't the smartest species or the strongest or the most advanced. We're just too stubborn to know when we're beaten." As the Indomitable pulled away from Kepler Station, its primitive engines, leaving a trail of ionized gas that sparkled in the starlight, the galactic representatives watched from the observation decks. They were already planning changes to their military doctrines, their engineering practices, and their approaches to problem-solving. The human ship transmitted a final message as it reached the edge of the system. "If you ever need help again, just call. We'll come running, probably with the wrong equipment and no clear plan, but we'll come." The message was recorded and transmitted to every capital world in the galaxy. Within days, military academies were adding courses on adaptive chaos theory to their curricula. Engineering schools began teaching productive redundancy. Diplomatic Corps started studying something they called constructive stubbornness. The Void Collective had been defeated, but more importantly, the galaxy had learned something new about itself. In their pursuit of perfection, they had forgotten the value of imperfection. In their quest for advancement, they had lost the ability to adapt. Sometimes the most sophisticated solution was to keep things simple. Sometimes the best strategy was to have no strategy at all. And sometimes, when faced with impossible odds, the most logical thing to do was to be completely illogical. The humans had reminded the galaxy of these truths, not through lectures or demonstrations, but by simply being themselves. Chaotic, stubborn, and absolutely refusing to give up when any reasonable species would have surrendered. As the stars wheeled overhead and the galaxy continued its ancient dance through space, 17 different civilizations began the long process of learning how to be beautifully, effectively, and productively imperfect.